There is a kind of pain that never explodes. It just stays. It sits quietly in a voice. In the way a note bends. In the pause before a lyric finishes its thought. Long before America learned how to talk openly about loneliness, someone was already singing it. Bobby Womack did not write songs to be liked. He wrote them because silence was worse. Because some feelings had nowhere else to go. While the world debated his mistakes, his music kept telling a different story. One about regret that does not ask for forgiveness. About love that turns cold without warning. About men who lose everything and still wake up the next morning. These were not songs built for celebration. They were built for late hours. For car radios after midnight. For kitchens where the lights stayed on because sleep would not come. Most people heard his name before they ever heard his truth. They were told who he was instead of listening to what he was saying. And that may be the greatest misunderstanding of his life. This is not the story of a scandal. It is the story of a man who turned shame into sound. And somehow made millions of people feel less alone because of it. Long before loneliness became a word people were comfortable using, it lived quietly inside a crowded house in Cleveland, Ohio. Too many bodies. Too little space. And a constant understanding that need was something you learned to hide. Bobby Womack grew up surrounded by voices, yet privacy never existed. Children slept together because there was no other option. Hunger was common enough to feel normal. When food ran out, his father framed it as faith. His mother framed it as survival. Between those two ideas, Bobby learned early that pain could be explained away, even when it did not disappear. The church was the only place where sound felt safe. Gospel music filled the room with structure and release. Harmony gave order to chaos. Singing was not entertainment. It was regulation. It kept tempers down. It kept fear quiet. Bobby watched men rehearse songs about hope while living lives full of uncertainty. That contradiction stayed with him. He learned by copying. By listening closely. By noticing how voices cracked when the truth slipped through. When his father finally heard his sons imitate the church singers, discipline softened into belief. Music became a path, not just a pastime. The guitar revealed something else. Playing left-handed upside down, Bobby found a way to express what could not be spoken. That first moment of approval did not feel like praise. It felt like relief. As if sound had earned him protection from a world that asked too much too early. Traveling with his brothers exposed him to life beyond the neighborhood. Church halls blurred into long drives. Applause came and went. What stayed was the understanding that music created distance between you and hunger. Between you and being stuck. Meeting Sam Cooke widened that distance. Sam was confidence embodied. A man who moved freely between sacred and secular without apology. He showed Bobby that faith and ambition did not have to cancel each other out. That a black man could control his sound, his image, and his future. The shift from gospel to secular was not rebellion. It was practicality. Survival had always been the lesson. Songs changed, but the purpose did not. Music was still shelter. What Bobby carried with him from those years was not optimism. It was awareness. He understood early that success did not erase need. It only changed its shape. The hunger he escaped physically followed him emotionally. That quiet awareness would later define his music. Before fame. Before scandal. Before judgment. The silence began there. In a house full of people. In songs meant to save everyone, not just him. Success arrived quietly, without ceremony. There was no single moment when life suddenly felt safe. For Bobby Womack, recognition came in pieces. A tour here. A studio session there. A song that worked for someone else before it worked for him. He was inside rooms filled with legends. James Brown demanded perfection with force. Every mistake was punished. Every night was a test of endurance. Bobby learned that discipline could sound like violence when pressure never stopped. But it taught him control. It taught him how to survive under lights that did not forgive hesitation. With Solomon Burke, survival took another shape. The road was long. The money unreliable. You learned how to eat when venues did not pay. How to move when cities did not welcome you. These lessons were never part of the music business brochures, but they were essential. Then came the moment that should have changed everything. A song Bobby wrote was picked up by the Rolling Stones. Suddenly, his words were traveling the world without him. A royalty check arrived that proved something rare. Writing could outlive performance. Ownership mattered more than applause. Yet even that moment did not bring peace. Fame increased distance. People knew his voice, not his interior. Studios replaced churches. Applause replaced prayer. The structure that once regulated emotion was gone. His music during this period sounded different from others chasing hits. Songs like, "That's the Way I Feel About Cha," and "Woman's Gotta Have It," were not declarations. They were admissions. They did not celebrate love. They studied it. They asked why it failed. Why it disappointed. Why it left people colder than before. Soundtracks followed. Across 110th Street carried danger in every note. It fit because Bobby understood tension as a constant state. Success did not soften that edge. It sharpened it. Working with Ray Charles exposed brilliance mixed with chaos. Some environments demanded too much. Bobby learned when to leave. With Wilson Pickett, the energy was explosive. The music burned fast. So did the habits that came with it. Cocaine did not arrive as escape. It arrived as fuel. As confidence. As something that promised control and delivered debt. At his peak, Bobby Womack was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Celebrated. Isolated. Admired. Misunderstood. His voice became heavier, slower, more deliberate. It carried pauses where silence spoke louder than melody. Listeners felt something real, even if they could not name it. Fame had not cured the feeling he carried from childhood. It had only given it a microphone. And the audience was listening, even if they did not yet understand what they were hearing. Grief does not arrive with instructions. It arrives demanding decisions. When Sam Cooke died, the ground shifted beneath everything Bobby Womack thought he understood. Sam had been more than an icon. He was protection. Knowledge. A living example of what control could look like in an industry built on taking. In the days after the funeral, chaos filled the space where guidance used to live. People moved quickly. Too quickly. Money circled. Intentions blurred. Bobby stayed close to Sam's widow, Barbara, believing presence meant responsibility. He told himself loyalty required action. At first, it looked like protection. Pushing away people he believed were taking advantage. Standing guard where Sam once stood. But grief is rarely patient, and loyalty, when mixed with loss, can lose its shape. When that closeness became marriage, the country reacted before Bobby could understand what he had done. The judgment was immediate and unforgiving. Fans felt betrayed. Sam's family felt violated. The narrative locked into place, leaving no room for explanation. Bobby did not defend himself well. He did not know how. Silence became his shield, and silence rarely wins in public. Concert crowds booed. Radio stations quietly removed his songs. The same voice that once felt familiar now sounded unwelcome. Violence followed. Sam's brother confronted him. The encounter ended with blood, broken bones, and humiliation that lingered longer than the injuries. It was the moment Bobby realized music no longer protected him from consequence. The room had changed. And he was alone in it. Personal failure deepened the collapse, crossing a line that erased whatever sympathy remained. A gunshot. Hospital lights. A reputation that hardened into something permanent. Drugs moved in easily. Not as escape, but as insulation. Something to slow thought. To quiet memory. Then came loss layered on loss. His brother Harry was killed suddenly, senselessly. Later, his infant son died in a tragic accident. Grief stopped asking for permission and settled in. When his oldest son took his own life years later, the damage was no longer abstract. It was total. Music did not stop, but it changed tone. The joy thinned. The pauses grew longer. Songs sounded like conversations with someone who could not answer back. His voice carried exhaustion without surrender. Bobby survived, but survival looked different now. Fame was gone. Judgment remained. What stayed constant was the honesty in his sound. These were not comeback years. They were endurance years. And sometimes, endurance is the bravest part of the story. America does not forgive quickly. It forgets, then revisits, when the noise fades. For a long time, Bobby Womack lived in the background of American memory. His songs remained, but his name drifted. Played softly on late-night radio. Heard in kitchens, cars, and bedrooms long after midnight. Felt more than discussed. To many listeners, his music arrived without biography. They did not know the scandals. They did not need to. The songs spoke directly to private moments. Loneliness. Regret. The quiet understanding that love does not always save you. As decades passed, the culture shifted. America slowly learned how to talk about mental health. About grief that does not resolve. About men who carry shame without language for it. And suddenly, Bobby's music sounded ahead of its time. Critics returned to his catalog with distance instead of judgment. They heard craft instead of chaos. Vulnerability instead of weakness. A songwriter who allowed his voice to age, to slow down, to carry weight. His phrasing influenced modern R&B in subtle ways. Not flashy. Not loud. But honest. Younger artists referenced him without explanation. Sampling his work. Covering his songs. Studying how he let silence finish sentences music could not. He became a blueprint for emotional transparency long before it had market value. Outside the United States, that recognition had arrived earlier. British soul audiences never let go of his writing. Collectors treated his albums as documents, not products. His reputation traveled better than his story. In 2009, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction felt less like celebration and more like correction. A quiet acknowledgement that history had moved too fast to understand him the first time. It did not rewrite the past. It reframed it. By then, Bobby was tired. His body was failing. Fame was no longer the goal. What remained was respect. Earned slowly. Without headlines. America did not suddenly embrace him. It listened again. And sometimes, listening late is still listening. By the time the world slowed down enough to understand him, Bobby Womack was already carrying the weight of a lifetime. Illness arrived quietly. Diabetes. Alzheimer's. Cancer. His body weakened, but his music did not soften its truth. There was no grand farewell tour. No dramatic final chapter. Just a man living with the consequences of choices, grief, and time. Looking back now, it becomes clear that Bobby Womack was never meant to fit comfortably into the story America prefers to tell about its artists. He did not offer redemption on schedule. He did not clean up his pain for public approval. He sang while still bleeding. His greatest legacy is not a headline or a chart position. It is the way his music sat with people when no one else could. When pride made talking impossible. When regret arrived without warning. When love failed and silence felt heavier than noise. He gave voice to emotions men were not taught to name. Loneliness without drama. Shame without apology. Survival without triumph. Long before conversations about mental health entered the mainstream, his songs were already there, waiting. Bobby Womack did not live a perfect life. He lived an honest one. And honesty, when preserved in music, lasts longer than image. In 2014, his life ended quietly at 70 years old. No resolution. No rewriting of history. Just the closing of a chapter that had already shaped countless others. Today, his voice still finds people in the same places it always has. Late at night. On empty highways. In moments when words feel inadequate. He does not demand attention. He keeps company. If you have ever played one of his songs and felt understood without knowing why, that is his legacy. Not forgiveness. Not controversy. Connection. So maybe the best way to remember Bobby Womack is not to explain him at all. Just listen. And if one of his songs ever stayed with you longer than expected, share that moment. Someone else may still need it.